As you know, Jimbo Fisher's been fired. There's a coaching search happening at Texas A&M. Now, I do want to talk about the kind of mechanisms involved in the search first. I am more resolute today even than I was the other day in saying there are names in play for this job that you don't even know are available because it's that good a job. How good a job it is, don't worry, I'll loop around to that nonsense in a second. For those who understand this industry and this sport, they know this is a tier 1 job. Not 2, not 3, tier 1 job. Everything they need as head coaching candidates, they have at Texas A&M. And so it is attracting a lot of attention, obviously. I was listening to longtime friend of the program, Billy Lucci, and the folks over at Texags talk the other day, and what he said was the same thing that I had heard about when they fired Jimbo. See, sometimes when you fire a head coach, it's conventional wisdom that you wouldn't have fired that guy if you didn't already have his replacement lined up. I heard that's not what Texas A&M did. Lucci, who basically runs that place, also echoed that sentiment. That's not what they did. Now, they may have a sheet they can pull out. Ross Bjork may have that sheet, that every AD talks about in their top drawer that they could pull out at any given moment. I'm sure he has that. I'm sure he didn't make the decision to fire Jimbo and say, well, now what are we going to do? No, I wasn't quite that foggy, but I can also promise you they didn't have a name in Sharpie already written down and agreed to in principle before they walked down the hallway and said, Jimbo, this is it. You're out. What they do have is supreme confidence that the value of their job is kind of along the lines of what I'm talking about. And the early returns that's being validated by the interest from all 4 corners of the country that they're getting. I say that geographically very intentionally. There are a lot of names interested in this job. Now, I have been asked on a bunch of radio hits I've done in the state of Texas and elsewhere this week, what kind of person is a fit at A&M? When I was driving back from the airport the other day, I was talking to Kublik, and we were talking about that. We were talking about what fit even means. And I'm pretty much in agreement with him that it's a very, very overused and misunderstood term in coaching searches. And I'll take you back just 2 years ago. A guy by the name of Brian Kelly got hired at LSU. And some people, said he's not a fit there. He's not a fit. Why? I asked. And they just kind of rambled incoherently, and they said things about his accent, and he's never lived in the South, and just stuff that has very little to do with football. And I countered with the blueprint and the formula that wins in college football. And I said, hey, the critical factors that win at Notre Dame are the critical factors that win at Clemson, are the critical factors that win at Oklahoma, are the critical factors that win at LSU. There are some non-negotiables. There may be some different ornaments and trappings here and there on the Notre Dame tree versus the LSU tree, but by and large, the same stuff wins that has always won everywhere across the country with comparable resources. And then Brian Kelly went and won the SEC West, and everyone shut up about culture and fit. And that's exactly what would happen no matter who A&M goes and gets. The moment he comes in there, he could talk with the thickest New England accent in the history of the state of Texas. If the guy wins, he's a good fit. Conversely, he could walk in with a belt buckle viewable from the space station and straw sticking out of his mouth with a cowboy hat on. And if he loses, he's not a good fit. Like, fit is about doing what it takes to win. In sports, college football is no different. And so when we start looking at a list of candidates, that's what I care about. Do I think the guy can win there? I don't really, frankly, care about all the other stuff on the periphery. And a third thing that I'm picking up on a lot as I peruse a lot of message boards and listen to a lot of fans talk, because I'm always fascinated by what the fan base thinks during a coaching search, is, what's the best way to put this? Meemaw didn't have a really good quote for this. She wasn't really into coaching searches. It's important to spend what's needed at a time like this. It is not imperative to just spend what you have. And the best way I can equate this is, I was at the Michigan-Penn State game last Saturday, and Michigan famously at this point ran the ball like 30-plus times in a row to end the game. Now, I guarantee you on that offensive play sheet that was laminated that those coaches have, there were a number of pass plays that they worked on a lot, and they repped in practice Tuesday during installs that they never ran. And the reason they never ran those plays is because they realized we've got a vice grip on this game right now, and we don't need to. Just because we practice them, just because we have them, doesn't mean we have to run them. Coaching searches are the same way. Just because you have deep pockets, just because there are some flashy candidates out there that would steal the mainstream headlines and win the press conference, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the right guy for the job. And number two, just because you can pay someone $11.5 million a year and reset the pay scale in college football doesn't mean you have to. I know you guys have mixed emotions on a guy like Traylor at UTSA. I'm not even inserting him as my favorite or anything. I'm just saying as a matter of principle, let's just say he's the best guy for the job. Let's say Mike Elko is the best guy for the job. Those aren't the biggest headline grabbers in the history of this sport on the day they're hired. But if they're the right candidate, they're the right candidate. And if you don't have to break the bank to get them, that's just an added bonus. But sometimes if you know you got money, like if I know I got money, it doesn't matter if this steakhouse down here off an exit in Hamilton, Georgia really has the best steak in the West Central Georgia region. If I know I got a 4.5-star establishment down the road in Columbus or up the road in Atlanta and I can afford it, sometimes people are dumb enough to just go there and pay the money because they think they have to since they have it. You don't have to. You can go to Hunter's Pub. You can go to Hunter's Pub and you get you a nice ribeye, you get you a nice filet mignon, as we would call it in Harris County, for under $50. It is a wild, wild time in this coaching search, though. So I want to revert you back to a theme that's existed on this show since the moment that Jimbo got fired. And it's a little game we play that only has losers. And it's called How Good a Job is Texas A&M? And you may think this is worn out. And you may think, well, you already talked about this. You're right. Yes, you're right, I have. Yes, it's worn out. But I have discovered this kind of, it's funny. There are people who call A&M fans a cult. And it's crazy because the cultish-like nature of Texas A&M fandom pales in comparison to the cult of people who exist on the internet that claim A&M is not a Tier 1 job. It's like college football flat earth. I never knew they existed. And all of a sudden they make their argument like a flat earther would. And at first you laugh because you think they're joking with you. But they keep their face straight. And then they just stare at you. And you go like this. You go, oh, are you serious? And they look at you and say, mm-hmm. And then you ask them to present their evidence. And it just twists your mind in a pretzel. And they never smile the whole time. And they just get more and more serious. So, Colin, could you do me a favor? Could you show tweet number 1? I've just compiled some examples. In classical fashion, the word your is going to be misspelled 90% of the time when these people try and slander you. If you're listening on podcast, I had a guy come at me because I committed the sin of broad strokes comparing Georgia pre-Kirby to A&M. And all I was trying to say was once upon a time, there were people who said Georgia can't win a national championship, even though they have good resources. There's something about the program, so it's not the best job in America. It's not a Tier 1 job. Georgia was always a Tier 1 job, waiting for the right candidate. It got the right candidate. That dude named Kirby Smart walked in, demanded the resources they always had. They finally came off the hip pocket, and they've won multiple titles. This dude comes at me and says, you're comparing apples to oranges. Y-O-U-R. You're comparing apples to oranges. Georgia last won a national championship. It wasn't before World War II, though. They had won the SEC multiple times in the last 20 years. A&M can't make it to Atlanta. This is a money quote, people. Listen to this. All you look at is money and resources, but there are other factors as well. You're casual. Again, Y-O-U-R. I don't know what about my casual he's referencing, but listen to that sentence. All you look at is money and resources, but there are other factors as well. Like what? I never get an answer, by the way. I always ask, What, in addition to money and resources, makes a job tier one for the right candidate? Like, do you think Nick Saban looked at Alabama, saw that they had money and resources, and said, there's some other things I need? No, he came in, and if there was a rogue booster that needed to be taken care of, he disassociated him from the program. You know, if there were facility upgrades that needed to happen, he did that. If there were people administratively that didn't understand how the game's played, he looked them in the eye and said, it's either you or me. Okay, the right candidate does that. That's the whole point. You don't have to do the apples to apples comparison with Georgia A&M. I feel like what I'm saying is common sense. That's why I get a little worked up. Colin, please go to the next tweet. So the next tweet involves a guy coming at me and saying, you're dealing with SEC fans, so it's not a surprise, but it doesn't change the fact that your A&M take is wrong. So I asked the guy, what is my A&M take? How is it wrong? And what is the right take? Guess who didn't respond? The dude who made the allegation. And then I dug a little ways into the replies to said tweet, and I did find something that's interesting, and that's the third tweet, Colin, if you'll throw this up, because this is an argument that I used to hear about A&M, and I think the expiration date has long passed on this argument. But at least there was a thoughtful response here. And this person said, I think A&M is a good job, but I would not call it elite because it's going to be in Texas's shadow whenever Texas is good. They were able to recruit effectively when UT was down, but I think as UT keeps showing consistency, A&M is going to have trouble recruiting in state. Okay, on the surface, that's wrong. Just on the surface, even if you did have to live in the shadow of Texas, there are too many elite kids in the state of Texas to say that, okay? Secondly, no one's taken 100% of the kids they want in Texas, including University of Texas, and that's if Sark wins multiple titles. It's just not realistic. That's not the way it works. Number three, and let me zoom out a little bit here. Let me tell you something. A&M does not take a backseat to Texas anymore. That's Big 12 talk. Okay, that's Southwest Conference garbage. This is the SEC they're about to be in. Texas does not have any bigger seat in the SEC than A&M does. That is a bygone mentality, and folks need to shake it. And I know what BAS is. I know what battered Aggie syndrome is. Trust me, I'm familiar with it. I know the history of that program. I know why it exists. It doesn't have to exist. That's a rear view thing. That's not a windshield thing. You come to this conference, which you guys already have, and then you don't welcome Texas in, but you watch them walk in. They sit in a seat the same size as yours. The circle includes, at that point, 15 other member institutions. The only edge Texas has on you is one you let them get. The one they get competitively, the one they get through out coaching you and out recruiting you. It won't be because 27 different mechanisms exist in the construction and infrastructure of the conference they're in that give them a leg up. That is not the way this is going to work moving forward. If A&M's in Texas's shadow, it's going to be because A&M hasn't done things on their end to make sure they're not. But there is no limiting factor in the SEC that will artificially prop up Texas over Texas A&M. So I don't believe in that anymore. I would suggest you guys adopt that mentality as well.